Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello, we are from Group 1. For today material, we will be explaining about cognitive code learning approach. Let me introduce myself. My name is Fiorian Gisti, and here are several members that join me about discussing this material. Without further ado, let's get into the topic.
And this is the definition of cognitive code learning. So, cognitive code learning refers to a theory of second language teaching and learning rooted in cognitivist psychology and structural applied linguistics developed in the 1960s. The theory emphasized the central role of cognition in the conscious and explicit learning of the rules of language as a code. Background. The cognitive code approach of the 1970s emphasized that language learning involved active mental processes, that it was not just a process of habit formation or the assumption underlying the audiolingual method that came before it. Lessons focused on learning grammatical structures, but the cognitive code approach emphasized the importance of meaningful practice, and the structures were presented inductively. An example, the rules came after exposures to examples. There was, however, little use of examples from authentic materials.
Cognitive learning theory. Cognitive learning theory explains how internal and external factors influence an individual mental process to supplement learning. Delays and difficulties in learning are seen when cognitive processes are not working regularly. These processes are such as attention, observation, retrieval from long-term memory, and categorization. Several research have made significant contributions to this theory. Jeremy Brunner focused on how mental processes are linked to teaching. Another research by Zean recognized that the environment plays a huge role and also focus on change that take place in the internal cognitive structure. You can read more about PH theory of cognitive development in our previous article. Today, cognitive learning theory is dominant in physiology. It is broken down into two categories. Social cognitive theory. This theory helps us understand how people are influenced, that their influence on the environment. One of the major components of social cognitive theory is observational learning. It is the process of learning others' desirable and undesirable behaviors through observation. It is a quick way of acquiring information when you individual take action. A person who demonstrates behavior for other persons is known as a model. This might be real people such as teachers, our peers, and supervisors, or symbolic models, also known as fictional characters that influence and observer behavior.
I will explain about cognitive behavioral theory. This theory will deliver to our mental process, just our thought and interpretation of life event. It explains how the thought, the feeling, and behavioral of a person interact with each other. To lead to particular emotion, which in turn lead to the specific response of behavior. When we change our thought, we can change our emotion, and then our behavioral it also in reverse. We're changing how we behave lead to change in our brain and ultimately our thought.
And I'm going to talk about cognitive learning method. In cognitive learning, learning occurs through cognitive memory structure with perceive, process, store of short or long-term, recall and retrieve information located in the brain. Learning occurs through internal processing or information. Learning a second language requires explicit instruction and a study of the language as a complex and rule-governed system. So in this cognitive learning, student needs to understand the linguistics rules before drilling can be implemented in practice. Learning should be holistic. Learning becomes easier when one treats the target as part of a structure of system and understand how it relates to the rest of the system. And then, learning a foreign language is a study of language as complex system with the goal of gaining conscious control of the auditory pattern, segmental and suprasegmental phonemes, lexical vocabulary stock, and grammatical pattern. And also, thinking, comprehension, and memory must be emphasized in this method. Language learning must be promoted as an active mental process rather than a process of habit formation or learned by doing activity. Classroom activities are designed to encourage learners to work out grammar rules for themselves through inductive reasoning. In this cognitive learning, content over from must be emphasized. And the last, lesson must be highly structured around a deductive process after giving the rule of the day.
I will continue to explain about strengths of cognitive code learning theory. There are 5 strengths based on Khalid Afsan cognitive code theory in applied linguistics. Number 1, it revives the emergence of grammar in the classroom. Number 2, it put more emphasis on guided discovery of the rules. This is the rules govern nature of language. Number 3, it rejected the habit formation of behaviorist theory. There is language acquisition rather than habit formation. Number 4, it stressed on the learning of the rules via meaningful practice and creativity. And number 5, the last, it practically focused on the individual students and his or her learning progress and process. Alright, this cognitive code learning theory is actually focused on rebuild students' ability in grammar and then guide them to discover learning is focused on learning process, learning the rules, and of course it's guide students to more attractive by practice and also build their creativity. And then this cognitive learning theory is guide student to focus on their learning process and also they got their progress.
And now I'm going to tell you all what are the weaknesses of cognitive code learning. The first one, cognitive code learning, is essentially a theoretical proposal because it is not lead to the development of any teaching method in relation to classroom procedures or even activities. The second one, as a theory, it often ignores that experience and culture in the past influence while we process information. And the third one, it is a depersonalized theory. In other words, It doesn't take into consideration feelings or unconscious actions or even reactions.
Advantage. The cognitive approach has some advantage over the other foreign language learning and teaching theories. Number 1. It revives the re-immerse of grammar in the classroom. Number 2. It put more emphasis on the guided discovery of the rules. This is the rules-governed nature of language. Number 3. It rejected the habit formation of behaviorist theory. There is a language acquirization rather than habit formation. Learning is not a habit formation but requires cognitive processing and mental effort because learners are thinking beings. It stressed the learning of the rules via meaningful practice and creativity. It liberated the teachers from the straitjacket of the grammar, translation approach, audiolinguism, and structural situation methods. But there's also some disadvantage of a cognitive code learning approach. It places a great deal of emphasis on the development of a second language as a combination of skills. At its core, cognitive code learning represents a theoretical rather than a pedagogical approach. Cognitive code approach is essentially a theoretical proposal because it did not lead to development of any teaching method about classroom procedures and activities. There is a little use of example from authentic material. It never took off in a big way. This theory did not gain support over time. Human thinking is said to be an invisible process and therefore cognitive processes are a hypothetical construct. Human information processing resembles computers, which perhaps oversimplifies the human mind. The human brain is much more sophisticated than computer systems.
Cognitive learning strategies. At Great Power Learning, our cognitive teaching strategies focus on meaningful learning. We don't focus on memorizing or repetition. Instead, our tutors teach students the fundamentals of lifelong learning. Your child will learn skills and strategies that will help him or her on the way to better grades in school, including how to think critically and how to make lasting connections between topics. There are 6 strategies. There are asking students to reflect on their experience, helping students find new solutions to problems, encouraging discussions about what is being taught, helping students explore and understand how ideas are connected, asking students to justify and explain their thinking, and using visualization to improve students' understanding and recall. How cognitive learning helps students? Cognitive learning helps students learn effectively and ensure that the concepts learned in class are understood, not just memorized. Cognitive learning helps students by, first, finding the most effective way for him or her to learn, whether your child is a visual learner, auditory learner, or otherwise. Second, help your child retain and apply new concepts successfully. And third, teaching your child how to take a big picture approach to learning to understand how smaller thoughts fit into larger ideas.
And then I will come first. The cognitive theory is actually seen as an object variety of traditional grammar translation method with an attendant goal of overcoming one of the audio lingual approach. The cognitive code view of learning suggests the information is captured and processed by our brain and information process